Hello and welcome. This is Mary Ellen Hurtado speaking, and I would like to welcome everyone to our Insights in Sustainable Packaging webinar. We hope you find our webinar this morning and the information we provide informative, and mostly we hope to spark conversations on the subject to allow greater focus and direction on our path to improved sustainability. A couple of housekeeping points. Today's webinar will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out following the presentation. During our webinar, we will have a couple of poll questions, and we request for your participation. Questions can be submitted throughout the webinar and will be answered at the end of our presentation during a Q&A. Thank you so much for your participation, and now I will introduce our panelists. Your presenters today are Matthew O'Donnell, Account Manager, and John Brown, Vice President of Global Marketing, both with Selig Group. They will be presenting today's webinar, and we look forward to your participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. This is Matthew O'Donnell, Account Manager with Selig. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and also thank and recognize Lori Skudzinski and Mary Ellen from our marketing team who are integral in producing today's webinar. Since we are a container sealing company, and most of the invitees to this webinar are brand owners, closure manufacturers, or other players in the packaging industry, the topics, examples, and subject is tailored to sustainability in container sealing, but is likely also to apply other packaging as well. This webinar presentation and discussion is meant to serve to update our stakeholders as to the state of the packaging industry in regards to the subject of sustainability. The term sustainability has varying meanings and interpretation and is not likely to have an end state, but an ever-changing field with new horizons, technologies, and interpretations. Quickly, a brief introduction to Selig Group, consisting of 4 product lines. Selig Flexibles, produced in Switzerland, primarily serving the European flexible packaging industry. Selig Technical, also produced in Switzerland, which produces thicker, high barrier laminates protecting high value products. Performance Systematics, which provides container venting solutions. And Selig Liners. Is the Selig Liners and the PSI vented container solutions that will be our main focus in today's webinar. The motivation and objectives for improved sustainability are different across the regions of the world, but the end result is to leave a better world for future generations. Many of our customers and brand owner partners, especially in North America, are signatories to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's 2025 Global Commitment, also known as the New Plastics Economy. Commitments have been made, mostly targeting a 2025 objective, but there's not been many plans shared as to how, as an industry, we will achieve these lofty goals. These commitments include statements regarding production of recyclable packaging, the use of recycled materials, also known as PCR, post-consumer recycled, and compostable materials. However, as we will highlight, materials and infrastructure for recycling in many cases are not yet available, or development plans have not been made public, making some packaging companies set targets without knowing how they will be achieved, especially when third parties or independent technology development or government actions may be required for them to meet their goals. For our European stakeholders, they have been influenced by these same consumer groups and non-government organizations, but have also been influenced heavily by local and EU regulations that encourage recycling and the use of sustainable materials, mostly through the use of a tax structure and extended producer responsibility systems, or EPR. We're following the regulations closely and finding that several countries seem to have conflicting goals and incentives, such as encouraging only the production of mono-materials, while others accept multi-material laminates, but only encourage the reduction in overall plastic use in the structure. How these goals will influence the overall design of packaging in the future is still unknown, and something that Selig, as a provider of flexible packaging in the form of container seals and traditional flexible packaging, is currently working on to optimize these often conflicting objectives. Of course, as consumers and members of the packaging community, we all share the responsibility and feel the need to improve our performance and leave our planet a better place. With images like these, consumer groups become more powerful and well-funded, and governments as well as industry groups are taking action to appease their consumer base. Certainly, there is plenty of motivation, both economical, societal, and ecological, to improve our situation. But before we attend to the solutions that we can provide, we need to understand the baseline of where we are today. At Selig, we spent considerable amount of time and resources globally to understand our customers and brand owners' needs, as well as government regulations and proposed regulations to help set objectives when developing technologies and products to meet these expectations. This is a global initiative for the Selig Group. Since the EU market objectives via the EPR schemes by country are still in many cases not yet passed, as regulations are still under debate, the situation in North America is arguably a bit clearer regarding objectives. However, this has not resulted in us being significantly closer to meeting these goals. Let's take a deeper look at where we at Selig see the state of the packaging sustainability in North America. Over the last year, we have had dozens of meetings with multinational brand owners, packaging companies, and retailers to help inform our own sustainability objectives, both operationally and from a product offering standpoint. We've also been active members of several trade organizations that are helping the industry set metrics, standards, and test methods for packaging sustainability. Two of the more well-known groups that we belong to are the Association of Plastic Recyclers and the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. Due to the pressing needs of the industry and the realization that there is little North American government oversight or industry mandatory standards on the subject of sustainability, these two organizations have received considerable interest from all parties in the consumer packaged goods community. Both organizations have considerable educational outreach, collaboration in subcommittees, where industry competitors are sitting at the same table and discussing how to move forward. Selig is using these organizations, as well as our own customers, brand owners, and others to help set aggressive but achievable goals. We were interested in how many of our registrants are members in these organizations, using their voluntary standards, test methods, or recycling advice to help set their own objectives. From our registration information for this webinar, we've determined that many of you are members of these organizations, or at least aware of their work, if not using them to help set your own objectives and standards. And if this is your first introduction to them, we encourage you to learn more. We have found through our many stakeholder discussions that the 3 R's of reduce, reuse, and recycle is the third R, recycling, that is the one seen as most important. And many brands have set recyclable packaging goals. The reduce action, although very effective, has been mostly maximized through the years by cost-cutting initiatives, as the resin or material cost of packaging plays a significant role in the overall price. The material that does not remain is often due to a slim factor of safety or requirement for shelf life, product protection, tamper evidence, or the product and packaging integrity. Reuse of packaging, often more heavy, fragile, inconvenient, or costly to reintroduce into the packaging system, does have a niche market and may be of greater value in the future. This leaves us with recycling, the realities of which are often misunderstood and result in wish cycling, as consumers feel they have done their job when their package hits their bin. But the Association of Plastic Recyclers has set some industry guidelines which render many recyclable bin items as landfill. Specifically, for small liners or closures less than 2 inches in all measurements, these loose items will fall through the municipal recycling facilities, or MRFs, conveyor systems by design and go directly to landfill. Also, anything with a 2D profile, anything that is flat, ends up being sorted as paper and then later rejected if it contains any foil or other materials that could interfere with the reclamation of the pulp. Any size liner that is not pulp will then be landfilled within our current MRF infrastructure. Additionally, to be considered recyclable, The item and its materials must be cost-effectively processed into PCR and have a demand awaiting for that PCR material. And finally, true flexible packaging, such as pouches, grocery bags, and the like, are not accepted by most MRFs and require a store drop-off to be open-loop recycled. In addition to traditional closed-loop recycling, which is the intent of much of the industry's effort, there are opportunities for open-loop recycling, where hard-to-recycle materials can serve another useful purpose and can be saved from a landfill future. As in PCR, the solution is to be found in creativity and literally thinking outside of the box or container for solutions. In the induction industry, we have seen interest in reuse as insulating or construction materials, similar to HDPE grocery bags and other flexible packaging, serving another life as park benches or plastic lumber. As noted previously, with today's MRF's infrastructure, even large induction seals and other flat or 2D materials with valuable foil and polymer get rejected since they are only looking for paper and end up being shipped with additional costs to a landfill. With all of this in mind, our sustainability objectives have been set using 3 pillars of activity: developing and offering more sustainable products, enhancing customers' overall package or product sustainability, and finally, our internal efforts at efficient use of resources. This is the first 2 areas of activity that we believe are of most interest to our packaging companies and their brand owner customers. The reuse of packaging is a return to the early history of packaging when the vessels were much more expensive to make and therefore would not be considered disposable. With the popularization of plastics and its relatively inexpensive cost, durability, and lightweight, it replaced much of the glass and metal packaging in the industry. The need to recycle was not evident, and packaging littering the landscape was thought to be a behavior problem, not a problem in containment. Now that sustainability has become center stage and society sees plastic packaging as a waste of precious, non-renewable resources, many companies are evaluating a return to reusable packaging. With much of today's sustainability focus on rigid packaging, both by NGOs and governments, some companies are considering the use of alternatives such as returnable or refillable glass or metal containers, or flexible packaging. Although requiring a large capital expense to convert filling lines, these changes could lead to more sustainable packaging in the perception of many companies and consumers alike, and in some cases, the avoidance of EPR taxes. In anticipation of these potential conversions, Selig has developed liners that seal to glass packaging, as well as flexible packaging from our Swiss facility that is monomaterial with oxygen barrier properties, as well as compostable flexible packaging. In order to better prepare ourselves in the industry for this potential shift, we'd like to get your opinion. Our first poll question will appear on the next screen. Please use the on-screen instructions to answer the question. After a short duration, we'll present the results.
For this morning's question, we're asking if your company is considering or working on projects to convert out of rigid plastic into glass, metal, or flexible packaging. So our results are in, and it appears we have the majority have voted at about 75% or so. 76% of you are staying with rigid plastics, with a second to that moving to flexible.
Thank you everyone for your participation. In our interviews with brand owners, customers, and with our knowledge of the SPC and APR guidelines and working committees, we believe the following technologies, some still in development, will become very useful tools to help our industry become more sustainable. We will have another poll question and we'll be very interested, especially in those developing technologies, in getting your opinion of them. By providing your answers and opinions, this allows us to approach our suppliers and third-party technology developers with some anecdotal evidence to support further development. It will also help us in prioritizing resources to work these opportunities. One such technology is chemical recycling, otherwise known as advanced recycling. Advanced recycling is a technology whereby currently hard to recycle items containing plastics, such as our multi-material laminates, can be stripped of their polymer content to be recycled. There are several technology platforms in development today to recycle such items. Currently, several MRFs are developing and testing systems to accept and sort flexible packaging, as flexibles makes up a large and growing segment of the packaging industry. Again, consumer and brand owner demand, as well as government regulations, may be required for advanced recycling to have demand that satisfies a business case to invest. The three technologies that are being developed today are conversion, depolymerization, and purification, each resulting in different levels of molecular reclamation. As noted on the last slide, advanced recycling is in development today. There are several pilot plants in production and is seen as a solution for complex materials such as laminates or mixed plastic rigid packaging. However, the technology can only be of value if it is presented with materials that are properly sorted, which will require investment by the MRFs, such as infrared and robotic technology, to identify the polymers of incoming materials and segregate them. We are not yet aware if small items less than 2 inches in all measurements, as well as flat items such as pouches, liners, and other flexible packaging and the like, will be included in the sorting to create a stream of materials for advanced recycling. But we are working to get the momentum behind this cause. If this is successful, that will solve the supply problem. But it then needs to be met with a strong demand for advanced recycling materials and at a price that is competitive. If these materials are considered PCR, and companies have set a PCR goal, this might help drive the demand for these materials. From our work with stakeholders, knowledge of government proposals, and trade organization involvement, expectations are being set for the future of sustainable packaging. We are very engaged in developing technologies and active in our own product development to meet these expectations. This is a global initiative for Selig, as we're aware that North America is really driven by consumer and trade group expectations, whereas Europe and some parts of Asia are subject to more rigorous government legislations. When considering sustainability and the lightweighting of packaging, one must also consider the reason for packaging in the first place, and where sustainability fits in the need to protect the integrity of the package and its content. As noted before, many packages have already been lightweighted, but we believe there are still many packages over-engineered with thick walls and stout finishes, and closures that could easily be lightweighted with the addition of an induction seal. We have seen conversions over the years when liners have replaced a poor mechanical seal and eliminated the need for a tamper band, or in the world of e-commerce, liners have negated the need for an expensive bag in operations to protect liquid packages in case of leaking from the seal area. Additionally, food waste has been highlighted as a significant factor in sustainability, with many products reaching their use-by date prior to the exhaustion of their contents. Induction seals, with their foil barrier protecting oxygen and light-sensitive products, have been significant in protecting those products. In the dairy industry, our customers have recorded a 17% increase in shelf life, as well as allowing further lightweighting opportunities for both the bottle and the closure. With a more robust seal, the stack strength of sealed milk jugs increases considerably to the point that traditional plastic milk crates are no longer needed. Regarding recyclable materials, we currently offer primary liners made from pulp or foam. Being single material products, They may be considered more sustainable or recyclable in some countries or by some companies, especially countries with EPR regulations that encourage monomaterials. But in North America, our hope is that these small items can eventually be sorted and added to their container counterparts in the recycling process. This is only likely to come after significant investment in traditional mechanical recycling. Using PCR is an excellent way to double the life of a material, or can be looked at as having the amount of resources needed to produce an item, assuming 50% PCR use. We are working with our suppliers to identify PCR raw materials that can be used in our products. The common liner materials, aluminum, plastic, and pulp, are all being recycled today, starting either as aluminum cans, plastic bottles, and newspaper recycling. But very few materials are being processed to a quality and consistency level to allow for thin gauge processing or use in food and beverage applications. We are in discussion with the supply base to develop more of these materials. We hope that with more support from our stakeholders like yourselves, these materials will soon become more readily available. Since PCR is likely to be available in the near future, we are interested to see how much support there is from the industry on PCR use. Thus, our second poll question.
For our second poll question, we'd like you to consider if our induction liners had 30% PCR, similar to CPT container goals, would your company be willing to support PCR liners? Well, there is an overwhelming response here, and we are happy to see that most of you would select to support PCR, most of your companies would select to support PCR liners. Thanks for your participation.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Selig is neither solely relying on nor waiting for advanced recycling to be commercialized to allow for a solution for complex material recycling. We are currently working several R&D projects that do not rely on this advanced recycling, but will require some level of third-party development, which is already well on its way to commercialization. Our projects include all plastic monomaterial liners that have a sealing technology other than induction, which today requires foil. One example is ultrasonic sealing technology. The example shown here is that of an ultrasonic process used with coffee capsules. These plastic capsules are just small plastic containers with seals that function similarly to induction seals. It's not difficult to imagine this technology being deployed in our industry. Some companies, trade organizations, and governments consider biodegradable or composting as a sustainable option. Although these materials are not part of a closed-loop recycling system, they can reduce the amount of discarded packaging in landfills. Much depends on the support of governments and recycling companies of industrial composting and an infrastructure to aggregate, process, and produce a saleable good. As we set our sights for the next 3 years, our pillars of sustainability and the related supporting programs are meant to meet what we believe our customers, brand owners, trade industry organizations, governments, and consumers are wanting to support. As technologies are getting developed, we are keeping a close watch through our contacts and memberships in the industry to help steer our objectives and goals, and we expect to meet the commercialization of these technologies with our own products and services to provide more sustainable packaging to our stakeholders. Next, we'd like to open up the webinar to questions from our audience. We would especially like to thank you in advance for your participation in the upcoming discussion and invite you to reach out to Selig separately if you believe we could be of service to the advancement of your goals, your companies, and the industry in general. We are truly all in this together.
Thank you, Matthew. This is John Brown. I'll be helping Matthew review and answer the questions you've sent in. As a reminder, if you do have a question, please ask using the question option on your GoToWebinar menu. We do have a couple questions that have come in already. The first question is from a closure manufacturer, and the question is, when will chemical recycling become more prevalent? This is what we call chemical, or some folks refer to it as advanced recycling. As far as chemical recycling and it becoming commercialized, the more simple technologies, ones that actually just purify a stream of homogeneous, typically post-industrial waste, is known as purification technology. They're in pilot stages now with some, at least in North America, with some small scale production. The technology basically takes at least what I'm aware of is an olefin scrap, polyethylene, polypropylene, let's say, and purifies it, removing things like colorants or additives, and it basically results in the polymer being returned to its original state. For more complex materials like multi-material polymer or laminates, or more complex laminates like pouches with foil or induction seals, the technologies to convert those are more likely to be commercialized in the next 3 to 5 year time frame, and there are several companies working on that technology. As mentioned before, however, if this is expected to be a solution for consumer goods packaging, the system to collect and especially sort these type of materials to get to the advanced recycling centers will also need to be developed. And most likely funding for that development, the MRFs will need some sort of funding to get to the point of being able to recycle those materials. However, some what we would call post-industrial waste, not post-consumer waste, but things coming out of factories, that is waste, such as for our closure manufacturers in North America who buy tape material from us, if you will. Once they punch out the liners, the discs, they're left with what we call a skeleton, a thin amount of or material that has is mostly the material's gone. There's just what's left after you punch out the disc. They would offer the recyclers, these advanced recyclers, a really high volume of consistent material composition, which is really critical for them in efficiently converting the skeletons, if you will, into usable monomers, polymers, or really kind of base molecules. So the short answer is in 3 to 5 years. That's being worked very much right now in the industry. We have another question from looks like a packaging company. The question is, have the sustainability and recycled content objectives set by many CPGs or consumer packaged goods companies, that's brand owners, those objectives that were set for 2025, have they been delayed or impacted by the pandemic? I'm not aware of any brand owners changing their goals. However, certainly, and as part of like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the New Plastics Economy, they do report annually their achievements. And I have noted in the recent year, several have not met their goals and what they expected to achieve before 2025. Hopefully they'll be able to accelerate their efforts to get back to the 2025 timing. But I believe many are finding success in putting more recyclable containers and closures into the market. but the use of PCR seems to be delayed, possibly due to plastics reclaimers, the MRFs struggle to process food contact approved materials. One other issue is the high cost of PCR versus virgin resin. PCR right now is more expensive than virgin resin. So if it's strictly based on economics, at this point, virgin resin seem to win out. One other question, we may have time for two more, but one other question, this is a very good question. Is an induction seal, or liners, is it considered part of the package for sustainability purposes? And I'm assuming they mean for like recycling or so forth. It really depends on who you ask. In our conversation with brand owners, several have noted that consumer behavior, consumers will remove the seal and whatever their behavior is now, if they remove the seal and put it into the trash bin, it's unlikely to change. Another perspective is there's an organization called the How to Recycle. It's a system. I think it's part of the Green Blue organization, has ties to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They, in conversations I had with them within the last month, they had not addressed liners. They haven't been asked to address liners, and at least in North America, you'll start seeing these How to Recycle labels. I've seen them on a lot of cartons, cereals and things like that, and it tells you what to do with each component of the packaging. If it's to be recycled or if it's not recycled yet or soon to be recycled. But they haven't addressed induction liners yet. But in the conversations with How to Recycle folks, they noted that these How to Recycle labels, which again are on your bottle or can or container, that consumers typically address these labels or look at these labels when basically when the bottle or container is empty and they're going to dispose of the container, it'll tell them what to do with the closure or the container, or if it's a box or something like that. Unfortunately, by that time, the liner is typically gone. It's already been removed and disposed of. So the How to Recycle, they're not even sure if they're going to address liners because that system is only really the liner's really addressed as soon as the package is open and they don't really consider the How to Recycle label. One more question that has come in. I don't recognize the person who had the question to come in, but the question is, has Selig looked into additives to cause quicker biodegradation? Great question. I'm not aware, but it is something. We do have a compostable flexible packaging product in Europe that we have commercialized. I'd have to look into that. The only issue with if it's a traditional induction seal with polymer or film, plastic film, or paper, biodegradable, even if it biodegrades more quickly, you'd probably be left with a foil which hasn't biodegraded. So our efforts are really looking at non-foil laminates that would be applied with wet glue to be applied to the container top, or the let's say an all plastic liner would be applied as you'd seen before with either sonic welding or possibly conduction. In that case, it would be we would be looking at some kind of a compostable structure. And additives to cause quicker biodegradation is a great question. I'd have to look into that and ask one of our scientists and our material science folks, but certainly that would be helpful. I believe that's all the questions that have been asked. If again, or any questions that come in late, or if you do have questions, you have our contact information on the screen here. Please, please send any questions or feel free to contact Matt O'Donnell, myself, John Brown, or your current Selig account manager. And we will answer your questions directly. And if they're more for a general audience, we will be answering those in the email we'll be sending out in a few days with a link to this recorded webinar that you'll be able to share with your colleagues. So at this point, I'd like to close out the webinar and thank my fellow panelists and facilitators, Matthew O'Donnell, Lori Skidzinski, and Mary Ellen Hurtado. Again, contact your Selig representative. And finally, if you have questions, if you have ideas for other webinar topics, please let us know. Thank you and have a great rest of your day, and thanks for your participation.